Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate 0. Oh, this is not a very good job. I thought I was ready when I accepted the job. Yeah, not a very, I never expected this. Not something Okabe is very ready for. What's going on? Call from Kurisu? Oh.
Hi.
Kurisu was displayed on the screen. Yes, it was Amadeus. The app the professor had given me allowed me to access the servers at Victor Conjo University from anywhere, 24 hours a day. It's going to be very psychologically disturbing for Okabe. This I hadn't predicted. I never thought she would call me, or that her face would be displayed on the screen. She looked really mad. I could guess why. I had gotten 8 calls from Kurisu, and I had ignored them all. Talking to a realistic girl on my smartphone with so many people around was pretty embarrassing. Man, what is this? More than that strangely polite, friendly Kurisu from yesterday. Angry, stubborn, more curious than anyone. The way she seemed to be constantly challenging you. I realized that this really was Kurisu Nakase. That was the girl I'd spent those 3 weeks with, lab member 004, my assistant Christina, aka Kurisu Nakase. Her movements were a little more jerky than I'd seen on the computer in Dr. Leskinen's office, but evidently that was because of the smartphone. This alone was enough to make me feel like my heart was being squeezed dry. I stood still, holding the smartphone tight. I thought to myself as I ran to catch up with the others. Maybe Dr. Leskinen was right, and this test would be a very cruel thing for me. But even so, in my mind, I was already starting to think about what I would talk about with Kurisu. Yasha was remembering. She was remembering the last night she'd spoken to Kurisu Nakase in person. That night, Kurisu was whispering to herself a lot. Victor Conjo University's Brain Science Institute. Maho and Kurisu worked in the same room at the lab. Thus, Maho was forced to hear Kurisu's angry mumblings whether she wanted to or not. A little was fine, but she'd been acting like this all day, and it was keeping Maho from concentrating. She finally snapped and turned away from the paper she was writing. English was the language most commonly used at Victor Conjo University. When the other staff and professors were around, she'd always use English, but when it was just her and Kurisu, Maho would often speak in Japanese. Kurisu stopped messing with her luggage and turned around. Kurisu apologized and started to scratch the back of her head. Maho decided to calm down by standing up and going to the shelf where the research notes were kept. There were several books she needed for her paper, but they were all up on the top shelf. This must be someone's idea of a prank, she said, as she stared up at a heavy book. She decided to try and reach for it, but no matter how she stood on her toes, she came nowhere close. Her tiny little arms seemed to her like dead branches waving in the wind. She bit her lip. After she'd skipped grades to go to college, and then come to work at this lab, she'd had more chances than ever before to hate her small stature. Whenever she walked outside after dark, the cops would stop her. Even with her ID, she couldn't get into bars, and buying medicine and alcohol at drugstores was a pain. The most humiliating part was that no matter where she went, everyone thought she was in middle school. Nobody believed her when she said she was 20. Everything in America was just too big. Kurisu noticed the trouble Maho was having and came over, but Maho was stubborn and decided to pretend nothing was wrong. Kurisu easily reached up to the high shelf and grabbed the book Maho wanted. Kurisu covered her mouth when she realized she said something she shouldn't have. Kurisu handed over the book as she spoke, and then suddenly her eyes went wide and began to sparkle. It looks like Kurisu had come up with a new idea. This was a regular occurrence for Kurisu, and Maho was used to it.
Amadeus?
No matter how advanced an AI was, it wouldn't talk to itself unless you programmed it to do that, and there was no need or even a point to a feature like that. If an AI started talking to itself, that might be a good indication that there was a self to talk to. But Maho hesitated to agree with her. Kurisu's expression dimmed. Kurisu and Maho were both treated as heretics in the lab, especially since they were Japanese and women. And Kurisu was simply too talented. Nobody ever actually did anything, but a lot of the older scientists were definitely avoiding her. Dr. Leskinen was the chief scientist, and the fact that he liked the two of them was all that let them do their research in peace. If the other scientists heard what Kurisu had just said, who knows what they'd do. Maho patted Kurisu on the shoulder. Maho remembered what Dr. Leskinen had said. Kurisu has a fragile personality. All the bickering in the lab is putting her under a lot of stress, and she's at her limit. It might ruin her as a researcher. That's what the professor had said. He was really worried about her. Kurisu whispered to herself. Maho didn't like being around lots of other people either, so she knew how Kurisu felt. But there were a lot of scientists who wanted to be published in a major journal, then go on to give public lectures. And she'd beaten out many of them to win that honor. People were jealous. She needed to fulfill her responsibilities, even if just to shut them up. Maybe I'm not that much better, though. Maho silently laughed a little and hated herself for doing it. Maybe I'm just as jealous as they are. That feeling, which was a little like fear, was something that she always felt. The girl in front of her was just that different from Maho. One she could never reach, no matter how hard she tried. Someone who'd surpassed everything she'd ever done almost instantly.
Senpai?
Kurisu was peering into her face, confused. Maho felt fluttered. Or flustered. She felt fluttered. She'd heard that Kurisu's parents were divorced, but that they were separated. Her mom was still in America and her dad was in Japan. After Maho said it, she wondered if that was too personal a question. But Kurisu smiled a little. Kurisu's smile changed into a small expression of consternation. Maho felt like she was hiding something, but didn't question her anymore.
Amadeus が喋ったんですか？あの子はそんなことしないわ。あなた、私が後ろにいるのに動画に夢中になってて気づかないことがあるわよ。はあまさかバレていたなんて自分のうかつさが憎い。
Kurisu actually seemed upset for once. This really surprised Maho.
先輩、お願いです。どうか他の人たちには内密に。別に隠すことはないと思うけれど。
The idea of sharing a secret with Kurisu made Maho happy.
分かった。言わないでおくわ。助かります。
Hey, that's a good friendship right there. Kurisu seemed genuinely early. Maho, yeah.
あなたが日本から戻ってきたら、アマデウスが独り言をつぶやけるかどうか、二人で検証してみましょう。はい。
Kurisu had a very happy look on her face. It was the face of a born scientist who loved to explore the unknown more than anything in the world. Her smile was as innocent as that of a child who'd just been given a new toy. It was very beautiful. And it was one of the reasons that Maho liked the younger researcher quite a bit. But the promise the two of them made would never be fulfilled. In fact, they would never even meet again. It felt like she was thinking about Kurisu more and more since she'd come to Japan. Maho didn't know if it was because she was in Japan or because she was talking with the Amadeus Kurisu more often, or maybe was it because she'd met the young man named Rintarou Okabe. Thinking back, the first day they'd met, she'd broken down and cried right in front of him. It was something she didn't really want to remember. She chased the memories away out of embarrassment. She snapped her head toward the PC monitor. Maho was in the middle of a conversation with Kurisu. She shrugged her shoulders and tried to ignore Kurisu's mischievous smile.
不思議だと思わない？レスキネン教授が岡部さんのことをあそこまで買っているなんて2度しか会ったことのない相手なのに、あなたのアクセス権も渡してしまったし、あそこまで信用していいのかしら。誠実そうな人でしたが。そう？向上心があるのかないのか、少しつかみどころがない人だったわ。好きなんですか？あなたね。
Maho brought her face closer to the monitor and glared. but Kurisu seemed unconcerned. Kurisu may not have looked like someone who would, but she really enjoyed this sort of gossip. Maybe girl talk was the right word. Maho sighed and sat back in her chair. The creaking sound echoed throughout the empty office. Kurisu let the matter drop. This bothered Maho a little. Maho had been spending a lot of time thinking about something since yesterday, to the point where she'd even put off her research. What kind of relationship was there between Kurisu and Okabe? What was Kurisu feeling in the days before she died? She would have liked to ask Okabe if she could. Maho shivered. It was as if Kurisu had been reading her mind. The way they used words like proof in normal conversation showed that both Maho and Kurisu were scientists at heart. Maho still didn't know if Okabe would even access Amadeus at all. They weren't forcing him to. Yes, it was interesting, but that was her opinion. As a researcher working on Amadeus, how would Rintarou Okabe feel about it? Wouldn't this be rubbing salt on the wounds in his heart? Maho realized she was getting much too sentimental. It had been a week since she'd arrived. The first thing she planned to do was offer flowers. But she still couldn't bring herself to visit the Akihabara radio building, the place where Kurisu had died. The sun was setting earlier, now that December had arrived. Katsumi Nakase was surprised by how quickly it had gotten dark while she was out rummaging through the cosplay shops. The wheeled suitcase on the ground next to her felt heavy. She'd done her best to jam everything she'd bought today inside, and it was bursting at the seams. Still, spending a whole day shopping with her cosplay friends was a lot of fun. She felt tired, but it was a good tired. Her footsteps were light as she walked back to the station. Oh, one of Mayuri's friends. Oh, Mayuri's scarf looks so fluffy. Fumiki tried to grab her friend Mayuri Sina for a hug. Mayuri dodged out of the way. Mayuri may have looked like an airhead, but she was actually quite athletic. Fubuki, by the way, was Katsumi Nakase's cosplay name. Katsumi was in her second year of high school. She and Mayuri were the same age, but were total opposites. Katsumi was boyish and athletic, and when she cosplayed as a male character, she attracted more female Komeko than male ones. Oh, hello. The four friends had gone to cosplay shops along Yuga Iwaya, Maiden's Road, and Tokyo Hands in Ikebukuro, then moved to Akihabara and visited several more. This was all part of their final preparations for Winter Kamima. Oh. Oh, Kaede sounded a little worried. Her real name was Kaede Kurushima, and she used her real name as her cosplay pseudonym. She was 3 years older than Katsumi and in college. Kaede was extremely feminine, and her measurements were just like the ones magazine models claimed to have, but she was very shy. People had tried many times to persuade her to enter the pageant at her college, but she'd always refused, saying normal events are kind of scary. But even so, cosplaying at Kamima with the rest of them was something she looked forward to.
だったらこの際だからまゆりちゃんを手伝ってみんなで衣装作りはしない？
Yuki proposed. She had very noble, elegant features, but the rest of her was easygoing and laid back. Though Katsumi was a fellow girl, she still thought Amayuki was beautiful. Even her light blue penetrating eyes lacked the arrogance that beautiful women usually possessed. They were filled instead with a friendly light. Ooh. Her real name was Yuki Amane. She was a senior at Meiji University, and in the same club as Kaede, she was the oldest of the four. She'd once tried to give up cosplay and focus on job hunting. After just 6 months, she'd given up on work and gone back to costuming. Since then, she'd been spending more time with Katsumi and the others. Ooh. Everyone smiled at her, but Mayuri quickly shook her head. Katsumi knew that it made Mayuri really happy when someone praised her cosplay outfits. Mayuri told them about an event that had quickly become a mainstay of the Japanese holiday year. Katsumi's only plan for Christmas Eve was dinner with her family, so she raised her hand instantly. None of her friends at school wanted to do anything that night. She'd been a little put out about that, since it meant they all had boyfriends. Oh. Kaede also nodded, but Yuki seemed a little hesitant. Yeah, girl friendship. Katsumi quickly jumped over to Kaede and gave her a big hug. Kaede was soft and smelled good, and enduring this sort of sexual harassment was nothing new for her. Yuki was an excellent chef and had been teaching Mayuri a lot lately. Both Katsumi and Kaede would also occasionally participate in what they called Yuki Amane's cooking lessons.
教えてあげる。本当？そうだよね。いろんな味があった方がみんなも喜ぶもんね。もしかしてクリスマスパーティー用に？うん、そうなのです。あと1ヶ月もないけど、それまでにマスターしたいなって。じゃあ特訓だね。いつにする？明日は？マユシーは大丈夫。
Katsumi went over her schedule in her head.
ああ、明日か。私、友達と約束が。私はバイト。
Katsumi really wanted to go, so she was pretty disappointed. She would have loved the chance to eat one of Yuki's good quiches. As she thought about the quiche, her stomach began to rumble. It was about time for dinner. Yuki and Mayuri worked out the time and place for their meetup.
場所は私の下宿先だとちょっと遠いから。ラボはどうかな？いいよ。頑張って作り方覚えるぞ。楽しいパーティーになるといいね。マユシ、サンタさんの衣装を作るからみんな着てくれる？ゴミ物分の他にさらに作るんだ。まゆりちゃん、気合入ってるね。マユシーはやる気満々だよ。
Mayuri posed like she was cheering.
サンタ服なら可愛いミニスカートのやつがいいな。白のニーソに赤いブーツとか合わせて。楓ちゃんはいいけど、私そういうの似合うかな。
Katsumi spoke to Mayuri and Yuki without any confidence in her voice.
本当は可愛い服の方が好きなくせに。
There was nothing Katsumi could say. She was right. It bothered Katsumi a lot that she looked like a boy, and she knew that sort of clothing didn't look right on her. Still, at heart, she was a young girl, and she wanted to wear cute clothes.
任せて任せて。まゆし、ふぶきちゃんに似合うのちゃんと作るから。おお、さすが俺の嫁。結婚して。ふぶきちゃん、調子いいんだから。ダルくんみたいなこと言っちゃダメだよ。あの変態紳士さんと一緒にされるなんてショックかも。ちなみにまゆりちゃんも一緒に着るんだよね、サンタさんの衣装。じゃなくって可愛いんだからもっとコスしようよ。でもまゆしーは作るの専門だから。意義あり。そんなのもったいないです。もうふぶきちゃんまで。それに岡部さんもまゆりちゃんの素敵な姿見たいんじゃないかな。オカリン？
Mayuri made a weird noise as soon as she heard that name.
オカリンさん？ああ、まゆしーの彼氏ね。
Katsumi had met him many times. He was tall but always looked pale and thin, and whenever he laughed, he seemed kind of sad. But from what Mayuri said, until just half a year ago, he'd been a totally different person. She said she was haughty and arrogant, but also kind and a great leader. Mayuri was known to let her emotions influence her judgment, so Katsumi didn't know how much of that description was accurate. Mayuri started to freak out even more after hearing the word boyfriend. あのね、ふぶきちゃん。オカリンとまゆしーはそういうのじゃないよ。またまた。Yuki and Kaede weren't buying it either. Honestly, Oka and Mayuri seemed more like an old wedded couple that had been together for years than boyfriend and girlfriend. 本当だよ。だってオカリンには他に好きな人がいるのです。Mayuri sounded totally unconcerned, which made Katsumi even more surprised. そうなの？本当に？Who could have guessed? It was Yuki, the eldest, who spoke first. ごめんね。なんか余計なこと言っちゃった。まゆしーとオカリンは幼なじみで仲良しさんっていうだけだから、
大丈夫だよ。そう。
Mayuri's smile seemed very sad to Katsumi. She felt a sudden impulse to give her schoolmate a hug.
それよりそれより。
Mayuri smiled and walked over to Yuki as if to blow away the awkwardness.
ねえ、ユキさんは？え？私？さっきの話。やっぱりクリスマスは彼氏さんと過ごすのかなって。本当にいないってば。そう？みんな誤解してるよ。私そんなにモテないし、ここだけの話、年齢と彼氏いない歴が一緒だもの。
First Mayuri, then Yuki. Katsumi was stunned.
そうなんですか？そこまで驚かれるなんて。じゃあ、ユキさん、
Mayuri started to fidget.
ダルくんなんてどうかな？橋田さん？また何を言い出すの、マユシ。橋田さんは変態紳士なんだよ。ユキさんがどこかにかけられちゃう。
The man that Katsumi and Kaede were insulting was Rintarou Hashida, a college student and a member of Mayuri's club. He was a hardcore otaku, one of the hybrid types who said he enjoyed both 2- and 3-dimensional girls. And like Katsumi had said, he was a perverted gentleman. He would say perverse things all day without the slightest shame. Whenever you told him he was a pervert, he would say, "No, I'm a perverted gentleman." He was a dangerous guy. But Yuki didn't seem bothered. She actually looked a little sad.
橋田さんはいい人だけど、なんていうか、私みたいな子、あんまり好きじゃないんだと思う。
Mayuri was shocked far above and beyond her usual limit. She was so surprised she let go of her suitcase's handle and let it fall to the ground, and instead of picking it up, she started talking frantically.
そんなことないよ。ダルくんはね、ユキさんに萌え萌えキューンだよ。きっとそうだよ。マユシーが保証します。夏コミまで初めて会った時もそんな感じだったでしょ。
Yuki had met Mayuri 4 months ago at Summer Kamima. Katsumi and Kaede had come wearing outfits Mayuri made. Kaede found Yuki at the convention hall, all by herself, and they met up. Afterward, they all gone to a party where she met Mayuri's friend Rintarou Hashida. Katsumi had definitely witnessed Yuki and Rintarou having a friendly conversation. Ever since then, Yuki and Mayuri and Daru had become friends, and Yuki had started going to Mayuri's club, the Future Gadget Laboratory. In other words, Yuki and Rintarou had been talking ever since Summer Kamima, but still, Yuki chuckled sadly and shook her head.
見てればわかるよ。なんとなく避けられてるなって。クリスマスパーティーも。だから私は行かない方がいいんじゃないかなって思って。橋田さんはもっとこう妹系の女の子がタイプじゃないのかな。しかもものすごく気が強くてね、お兄ちゃんを尻に敷いちゃうような妹。例えば鈴葉さんみたいな感じ。それは。
For some reason, Mayuri looked like she was about to cry. She seemed to want to say something, but couldn't bring herself to. Her lips were quivering.
まゆりちゃん？なんでもないのです。
But it certainly didn't look like nothing. Katsumi couldn't bear to watch her anymore, and so she gave in to her impulses.
まゆし、そんな顔しないで。まゆしは笑ってる時が一番可愛いんだから。ね、ほらほら、笑わないとくすぐっちゃうぞ。こちょこちょこちょこちょこちょ。
Katsumi snuck behind Mayuri and started to tickle her underarms.
観念した？もうふぶきちゃんは意地悪さんだ。マヨシーかわいすぎ。
Mary is laughing so hard she was crying, and this time Katsumi succeeded in giving her a hug. Even though they were in public, she started rubbing her cheek against her.
マヨシー好きだよ。大好き。わあ、ちょっとふぶきちゃん、このまま家に持って帰ってずっとペロペロしたい。それは困るよ。困ってもいいから結婚してくれ。無理だってば。
Mary tried to run away, but Fubuki grabbed her and started to kiss her all over.
なんか疲れた。それはマユシーのセリフだよ。
In the end, Katsumi kept clinging to Mayuri until they reached the station. She felt a lot better, but catching Mayuri when she tried to escape used up a lot of energy. Either way, now that she was satisfied, she shuddered and turned back towards Mayuri as an image came into her mind from out of nowhere.
ねえ、マユシー。なーに？冬コミマ、一緒にコスしようね。この前話したよ。冬コミマはね、マユシーは作る方に専念します。それでもいいからさ、とにかく冬コミマもこの4人で絶対一緒に参加しよう。ね、当たり前だよ。そのために今日みんなで買い物したんだよ。だよね。でも約束だよ。うん、約束。
Mayuri and Yuki split up with them in front of the station since they were taking a different train.
それじゃあね。おやすみなさい。まゆりちゃん、ゆきさん、またね。てってれー。バイバーイ。
Jeez, edit. Katsumi stood still and watched the two of them until they were out of sight. She felt like she was about to cry and looked up to stop the tears from falling.
ふぶきちゃん。
Kai was standing next to her, looking worried.
どうしたの？ごめん、なんでもない。なんでもなくないよ。もしかしてまゆりちゃんがどうかしたの？お願い、話して。
Even after Kaede asked, Katsumi wasn't sure she should tell her. There was no way she'd believe it anyway.
今日のふぶきちゃん、いつもよりテンション高かった。すごく無理してる感じがしたもの。気づいてたんだ。気づくよ。
Katsumi and Kaede had known each other for 2 years. Since their ages were so different, they treated each other like an older and younger sister, so at times like this, Kaede was really sharp. Kaede didn't talk much, but that meant she paid a lot of attention to the people around her. Part of it was also that Katsumi wasn't good at hiding things. She just couldn't lie to Kaede no matter what. She gave up and decided to say it.
マユシーがね、死んじゃうんだ。え、何？どういうこと？
Katsumi remembered the nightmares and the things she kept seeing no matter how much she didn't want to.
夢を見るんだよ。夢？夏ぐらいからかな。毎日毎日夢の中でマユシーが死んで、その度に私や楓ちゃんは泣いて泣いて、でもどうすることもできなくて、夕べ見た夢なんか最悪だった。私たちの目の前で突然マユシーが倒れて動かなくなっちゃうの。そのマユシーをね、オカリンさんが悲鳴を上げながら抱きしめて大きな声で叫んでて、ねえ、どうしちゃったんだろう私。なんでこんな夢ばっかり。落ち着いて、ふぶきちゃん。多分疲れてるせいよ。そうかな。
たのかな。
だってまゆりちゃん今日もすごく元気だったでしょ。
Kai gave Katsumi a gentle shoulder hug.
だから大丈夫。
私やだよ、まゆしが死んだりしたら。
そんなことありえないわ。絶対に
絶対に。
絶対よ。
Kai's words made Katsumi calm down a little. She was glad to have an older friend like this.
とにかく気のせいよ。そんな悪いこと起きるはずがないでしょ。
Her hand squeezed Katsumi's shoulder tightly. Being held like this made Katsumi feel a lot better.
ごめんね、変なこと言って。
But that night, she had the nightmares again. Suzuha Amane was about to run out of patience. The cause was the young man in the room with her, her father. Rintarou, aka Daru, his massively obese body was leaning forward over a computer monitor, and he had a dopey grin on his face. He'd finally gotten up around 11 a.m., gulped down 3 cups of instant ramen, and now was surfing the internet. That's what Suzuha called her father. It's who he was after all, so there was nothing else to call him. Suzuha was a time traveler from the year 2036, and 7 years from now, he would become her father.
いい加減にしなよ。一日中ゴロゴロして食べるかネットを見るかゲームをしてるかばっかり。即席麺やお菓子ばかり食べてると体に病変を生じるって警告しても治そうともしない。
In fact, his PC desk was covered with snacks. She cleaned it regularly, but it never seemed to make a difference.
運動だってしろって言ってるのに全然しない。
Suzuha realized she was complaining more than usual, but she had to say it anyway.
そんなんじゃ将来。
And then she realized that Rintarou wasn't even listening to her. His eyes were fixed on the computer monitor. He'd moved his mouse out of sight, but she could still hear him clicking it.
話を聞きなさい。
Suzuha approached her father from behind and put the hairspray can she'd been hiding up to his neck. Rintarou seemed to think it was a gun. He stuck his hands up. Threats like this worked. They worked because she told him that she'd survived the Third World War and the wars and chaos of 2036, and that she was ready to draw a gun and pull the trigger whenever she needed to.
Suzuha, やめてくんないと父さん怒っちゃう。
怒られるのは父さんの方。
はい、すみません。でもさ、僕の秘密の仕事知ってるっしょ？あれが結構忙しいんだよ。僕ぐらいのハッカーになると引く手あまたでさ、食事も適当に済ませざるを得ないっつうか、海外のクライアント相手だと時差もあって昼夜逆転しちゃうっつうか。
未来の父さんもそんなことばっかり言って母さんに叱られてた。100歩譲って睡眠周期は仕方ないとしても、これ以上健康を損ねるような食事は許容範囲外。即刻中止すること。いい？
だけど仕事もそうだけどタイムマシンの研究が大変なんだ。癒しが欲しいんだよね僕。
そうやって言い訳してすぐだらけようとする。甘えてるよ父さん。
Suzuha was always amazed that her dad managed to survive the future's wars. But since the time machine research would affect the future, and eventually Suzuha's very presence here, she couldn't tell him to stop. Even after Rintarou, Kabe stopped coming to the future gadget lab, Rintarou had kept working on the time machine all by himself. Suzuha never said a word about it. If she did, it might create a time paradox.
タイムマシンを作るのに未来から来たタイムマシンを精査しちゃダメだからね。
She decided to warn him again.
分かってるよそんなこと。でも時々自信なくなるんだよね。僕本当にタイムマシンなんて作るん？
当然だよ。しっかりして。
はい。
Suzuha took the hairspray can off his neck.
てっきり銃だと思ったらなんというはったり。父さんを騙すなんてひどいよ。
次は本物使うからね。
それマジ勘弁。
Suzuha put the can of hairspray back on the shelf. It was something Rintarou Kabe had left here when he lived in the lab. It was still here since its owner never came back for it.
漫画とかゲームだとさ、父親を叱る娘ってのはもっとこう燃えるんだけどな。鈴葉ちょっとさ、もうダメだよパパって言ってみてくんない？できれば甘やかすような口調で。なんでもないでござる。
Her dad shrank from Suzuha's glare. Suzuha sighed loudly and dropped herself on the sofa. She leaned back against the headrest and stared at the ceiling, then closed her eyes.
どうしたん？
なんでも。
隠しても無駄なのだぜ。鈴葉のなんでもないってのは話を聞いてほしいって意味っしょ。
え？
ほら、話してみるといいよ。
Daru sounded very serious. Suzuha's eyes went wide for a moment, but then she realized.
そのセリフ、この前プレイしてたギャルゲーにあったよね。それでフラグが成立するんだっけ？
She'd been living here for 3 months. She was starting to learn a little about Akihabara's culture circa 2010.
父さん、間違っても私を落とそうとか思わないでよね。
ねえよ、実の娘にそんなことしないって。
本当かな？未来の父さんはちょっと怪しかった。私が思春期になってからもよく一緒にお風呂入ろうって誘われたな。
何それ怖い。
私は軍属だったし、父さんはタイムマシンの開発に追われてたからいつも一緒にいられるわけじゃなかったけど、とにかくベタベタしてきたよ。鬱陶しいくらいにね。
Her dad looked honestly depressed, and she realized that she'd gone too far.
父さんはさ、いつも私に言ってくれてたよ。ここは最低最悪の世界線だけど、私が誕生したことだけは最高だって。私、未来の父さんを失望させたくないんだ。だから、絶対にオカリンおじさんを説得しなきゃ。
大丈夫。失望したりしないって絶対に。
そうかな。けどね、おじさんはどうしても話を聞いてくれないよ。このままじゃおじさんは過去へ行かない。マキセ・クリスを救出しない。シュタインズゲートにも到達しない。
Steins Gate. That was the name of the mysterious world line her dad had told her about in 2036, where World War III might not occur. Leading Rintarou Kabe to that world line was her mission. But right now, it wasn't going well. Suzuha had come to 2010, and just like the mission had called for, she'd succeeded in sending Rintarou Kabe to July 28th. But then he'd failed, and he wasn't going to try again. Every time they met, she tried to convince him, but who knew if her words were having any effect.
結局、第三次世界大戦に世界線は収束して、大勢の人たちが殺戮される。それを変えるために私は来たのに、何もできない運命なのかな。
Suzuha had something else she had to do here in Akihabara in December 2010 besides convincing Rintarou Kabe, and it meant she was running around every day. The exhaustion was starting to take its toll on her. During the war, she'd been able to keep herself sharp at all times, and this level of exhaustion wouldn't have meant anything. The relaxed atmosphere of 2010 was actually making her realize how tired she was. She was feeling very sleepy right now, actually. She was surprised at how willing she was to fall asleep in such an undefended position, but she didn't think she could beat the temptation. And then suddenly she felt something extremely cold on the back of her neck. She snapped awake in an instant. Her movements after that were lightning quick. She jumped up and slid behind the massive body in front of her, which obviously belonged to Rintarou, then grabbed his arm and twisted it as she dropped him to the floor. She went to draw the gun at her hip, and her hand swiped through empty air. And then she came back to reality. Her gun was hidden, she wasn't carrying it. This wasn't 2036. 2 cans of Dr. P clattered to the floor. That must have been what he put on her neck.
何するの父さん。
さっきのお返しだお。
ぼーっとしてたから危うく殺しちゃうとこだったよ。そういう訓練受けてきたんだからシャレじゃ済まないんだって。
わかったから話してくださり。言いたいでござるの巻。
まったくもう。
Suzuha let her father go. Rintarou rubbed his arm and stood up, then grabbed the cans of Dr. P off the floor. He offered one to Suzuha.
つうかさ、諦めんの早すぎだろ。もうちょっと頑張ってみるのだぜ。多分オカリンは疲れて眠ってるだけだから。今みたいに冷たい毒ペでも首筋に当ててやれば飛び起きるんじゃね。なんせほら、あのオカリンだし。
She realized her dad was trying to cheer her up and nodded. Then she heard footsteps coming up the stairs and some slightly off-key humming. Their eyes met. Just the sound was enough to tell them who it was. Suzuha moved fast, maybe even faster than when she knocked her father to the ground. She quickly and silently jumped behind the curtain that separated the lab's development room from the rest of it. Just as she hid beneath the desk, there was a knock at the door. Suzuha knew that voice, of course. It was her mom. She could tell from the noises he was making that her dad was panicking. There was another knock. Rintarou went to open the door. Suzuha took a deep breath and concentrated her mind. She remembered the time she'd spent 3 days and 3 nights on a battlefield with no food and nothing to drink, constantly aiming her rifle at the target. She erased any trace of her presence that could give her away. Her breathing started to become shallow. Dad, don't screw this up, okay? Rintarou came back into the room with a girl. She could hear plastic bags rustling. She must have brought the ingredients. Yuki Amane. Just as the name Amane suggested, she was Suzuha's mother in the future. In other words, the 2 of them in the other room were supposed to get married. Rintarou was clearly nervous. As far as Suzuha knew, the only girl he acted that way around was Yuki Amane. Suzuha and Mayuri were practically family, and he got along fine with big sis Rumi, Ferris Nyanya, who worked at the maid cafe next door. So it wasn't that he didn't know how to act around girls, but for some reason, he always acted different when she was around. Yes, she told him that Yuki would be his wife someday. It was too late to do anything about it now, but maybe that was a mistake, she thought. So this is the girl. Rintarou Hashida's sister was none other than Suzuha herself. Around the same time Suzuha had started spending all her time in the lab, Yuki had become friends with Mayuri and Rintarou and began visiting more frequently, which meant that avoiding her was almost impossible, and so she was forced to tell Yuki that she was Rintarou's little sister. But still, she wanted to keep contact to a minimum in order to keep Yuki from finding out somehow. That was why she was hiding.
そうそう。どうですこの服。この前買ったんですけど。
Yuki showed no signs of noticing Suzuha. She was touring around in the center of the room as if she was at a fashion show. Yuki was a cosplayer and wanted as many people as possible to see her dressed up. Mayuri told Suzuha that once before. In fact, Yuki and Mayuri spent a lot of time complimenting each other's outfits. So good. I agree.
ありがとうございます。橋田さんもおしゃれしましょうよ。ちょっとだけ痩せれば結構素敵だと思うな。私本気ですよ。
Rintarou Hashida and Yuki Amane, as she listened to their awkward conversation, Suzuha remembered the last time she'd said goodbye to her dad.
父さん、治安部隊が万世橋まで来てる。
ということは、ここが発見されるのも時間の問題かな。あらかじめ流しておいた偽の情報も効果なかったか。
急ごう。
おう、開けるぞ。
すごい。こんなところに扉があったなんて。これなら誰にも見つからないね。
さあ、中へ。
ここって。
Oh, the room was almost totally empty and covered from top to bottom in soundproofing materials. Not only were there no windows, there wasn't even a door to the hallway. The building they were in was once a symbol of old Akihabara before it was almost entirely destroyed by an air raid during the last days of the Third World War. Only a few people knew about the secret room inside it. The biggest reason was its secret, the silhouette of what looked like a satellite sitting in the corner.
これ
Who's
タ
the
イムマシ
girl?
ンだよね。これがタイムマシン。
That little girl there.
危ないからあんまり近づくな。
Kagari? Suzuha spoke to the little girl clutching Mayuri's hand. Most of the children in this era had skin inflammation somewhere on their body from all the radioactive rain, but she didn't. Her name was Kagari Shina. Her registration form said she was 10 years old, but no one knew if that was true. She was an orphan who lost her parents in the Tokyo air raids when she was a baby, and nobody even knew her birthday. The name Kagari had been given to her by Mayuri, who was working at the child welfare center that had taken her in. She took it from the word Kagaribi, meaning bonfire, and hoped that she could be a light even in these dark days. It had been 4 years since Mayuri had adopted her, and her name on the registration form had become Kagari Shina.
綺麗だね。ママ。そう。ね。
Suzuha motioned for the Shinas to step back and put her right hand and right eye up to the time machine sensor. The biometrics check cleared and the hatch slid open. She went inside and fastened herself into the seat.
これほど長時間の有人ジャンプは初めてだが、技術的には全く問題ない。これまでのテストジャンプ通りやればいいからな。
オーキードーキー。
Suzuha began to flip switches. Working her way through the startup procedure, she practiced it hundreds of times in preparation for this day. The faint rumble from the machine began to get louder.
データによれば、昔のラジカンはちょうどこの場所が屋上になってる。ただし、高さが1メートルほどずれてるからな。着地するときに衝撃があると思う。
了解。
The time machine could move through time, but not space. To arrive at the radio building more than 60 years in the past, she needed to launch from right here.
トラブルが起きても冷静にな。トレーニングを思い出せばいい。
大丈夫だよ。私は父さんのマシンを信じてるから。
Her words must have meant a lot to him, because he stuck out his lips towards her. She swished them back with her hands.
気持ち悪い。
悲しいな。鈴葉は父さんが嫌いかい？
父さんがやるとなんか下心があるみたいだから。
いくらなんでも娘相手に下心なんてねえよ。
最近母さんに似てきたハスハスとか言ってたのはどこの誰？
Her Her mother wasn't here. She'd become a victim of the war, brutally killed by the peacekeeping squads.
冗談を真に受けないでくれたまえ。
なんだ、冗談だったの？
Suzuha's voice sounded kind of disappointed. She set the destination for August 13th, 1975. Her first mission was there.
これでよし。それじゃあ父さん、まゆ姉さん。
She was about to say her goodbyes, but then... Oh.
屋上からで突入してくるぞ。
思ったより早い。
Suzuha drew her gun from her holster. She was about to get out of the time machine, but her dad stopped her.
ダメだ。さっさと飛べ。
でも父さんたちが。
俺たちのことはいい。早く行け、鈴葉。
そんな、だって。
マヤシ、かがりちゃんを。このマシンにはもう一人乗れる。
Mayuri and Suzuha's father picked up the stunned Kagari and stuffed her into the time machine.
すずちゃん、かがりをお願い。わかった。
Suzuha's mission succeeded. The world line would be rebuilt, and it was likely that the present Kagari would cease to exist. It might have been pointless to send her. But even so, a mother wants her child to live. That's how Suzuha's mom was too. Kagari finally seemed to understand what was going on. She called out to her mom.
やだ、やだよ。いや、大丈夫だよ。かがりちゃん。すずちゃんが一緒だから。ね、ダメ。ママも一緒じゃなきゃダメ。過去へ行けば昔のママがいるよ。今よりずーっと若くて。かがりちゃん、びっくりするだろうな。
Mayuri handed Kagari a tiny keychain. It looked old. It may have been a brightly colored green once, but now it was completely faded.
ママがずっと大切にしてきたウーパのキーホルダーだよ。かがりちゃんにあげる。大事にしてね。
Once it was pressed firmly into Kagari's hand, she stepped back. Mayuri was smiling but weeping at the same time.
いや、行きたくない。ママと一緒にいる。ママ、ダメ。かがり、おとなしくしてなさい。
Kagari fell silent immediately. Even Suzuha had never heard Mayuri use that tone of voice. That's how harshly she scolded her daughter. Kagari was quietly weeping, unmoving.
閉めるぞ。
This time, the hatch really did begin to close. The inside of the machine and the outside of it. The two worlds were about to be completely cut off from one another. Whether Suzuha's mission was successful or not, she would probably never see any of them again.
本当にかがりをお願いね。あとおかりに伝えて。スタインズゲートは必ずあるって。
絶対に諦めるな。大バカ野郎。ってな。
オキドキ。
And then the door was sealed shut, and Mayuri and Itaru's voices disappeared along with the chaos outside.
父さん、大好き。
She whispered towards the door, now sealed shut.
行くよ、かがり。かっこいい。
She booted up the time machine.
橋田さん、
Yeah, time
掃除機はど
travel.
こ？
Suzuha snapped back to reality. Yuki was getting closer to the development room she was hiding in.
そのカーテンの。危な。
この奥？
ああ、僕が持ってくるよ。
Itaru motioned for her to stop and then quickly slid into the room. As he reached down to pick the vacuum off the floor, his gaze locked with Suzuha's as she hid under the desk.
バレないようにしてよ、父さん。
オキドキ。
ありましたか？掃除機。
あ、うん。
Evidently, Yuki was trying to be nice by cleaning up. The place was pretty messy right now. Knowing Yuki's personality, Suzuha could imagine she'd want to clean it. Rintarou grabbed what looked like a vacuum cleaner off the floor and left the development room.
何ですかそれ。
未来ガジェット5号機。分解すれば普通の掃除機として使えるはず。
お掃除するための掃除機なのに分解したらかえって散らかすことになりません？橋田さんって頭がいいのに時々うっかりなことしますよね。
そうかな。
でもそういう人の方が私好きだな。
なんだと。
Rintarou started to panic again, and Suzuha sighed.
ただ生活については見直した方がいいと思うんです。お部屋の掃除はできれば毎日した方がいいですよ。ここ特に埃っぽいですし、それだけじゃありません。食事のこともそうです。今日もカップ麺だったんでしょ？
Yes, he good.
お台所に食べ残したまま放置されてます。
なるほど。
それにお菓子もこんなにたくさん。食べ過ぎだっていつも言ってるのに。
一応気をつけてはいるのだぜ。
一応じゃダメです。あんまりカップ麺やお菓子ばかり食べてると病気になっちゃいますよ。あと少しは運動すること。
Yuki Amane was saying the exact same thing that Suzuha had just said. Perhaps they really were mother and child. Suzuha was just beginning to feel a little homesick when she sensed another visitor approaching. The door to the lab opened, and a greeting she'd heard many times before resounded throughout the room.
ごめんね、ユキさん。ちょっと遅れちゃった。
It was Mayuri coming to see Yuki, but there was another presence there too.
まゆりちゃん、こんにちは。岡部さんも一緒だったんですね。
おかり、久しぶりじゃん。
ああ、久しぶり。
When she heard his voice, Suzuha ground her teeth a little.
興味深いわね。
なんだって？
聞こえなかった？興味深いと言ったの。
まさか行きたいとか言い出すんじゃないだろうな。
ぜひお願い。
話すべきじゃなかったな。
I was standing in the middle of Ikebukuro with a smartphone in one hand, staring up at the sky. I'd been trying to talk to the Amadeus Kurisu as much as possible lately. Sometimes I would contact her, and sometimes Kurisu would contact me. It didn't feel any different than having a friend who lived in the real world. Talking on a smartphone in a crowded place like this was a little embarrassing, but I told myself that compared to the things I used to do, it was nothing. I'd chosen harmless topics for our discussion, but it still reminded me so much of talking to the old Kurisu that I sometimes forgot myself. I'd done that just now when I accidentally told her about the lab. She had seized on it.
あんたが今話したそのラボ、オリジナルの私は行ったことが？
ああ、いや。
はっきりしないわね。どっち？
ないよ。
Kurisu had been part of the lab in the Alpha world line. In this world line, she died before ever becoming a lab member. Of course, she'd never even known what it was.
お前は勘違いしているようだから言っておく。ラボと言ってもラボじゃない。ただのお遊びサークルだ。それに
Suzuha is living there right now, and Daru spent a lot of time there. If they found out about Kurisu, things could get complicated.
言いかけてやめないでほしいわけだが。
なんでもない。
いずれにせよ、外の世界をいろいろ見て回ってみたい。今までは先輩や教授と話すときも研究室の中ばかりだったから。
だからこうして日曜の朝っぱらから池袋を案内してやっているだろう。
10 o'clock a.m. Even at this hour, the area in front of Ikebukuro Station was crowded. It was going to get even more crowded as it got closer to noon.
なんなら乙女ロードまで連れて行く覚悟はしていたんだけどな。
何よそれ。
お前の知らない世界が広がっている場所だな。
待って、今調べた。
本当に興味が湧いたか？
そんなわけあるか。とにかく今日はあんたのラボに連れて行ってよ。私に話して聞かせた以上 責任を取りなさい。よろしくね。
And then she hung up. It was like I was her own personal taxi service. Kurisu couldn't move around on her own, so there was no getting around that, but...
まったくわがままなやつめ。
She didn't seem to think very highly of me. At this rate, she might start treating me worse than a servant. The real Kurisu was one thing, or no, maybe it wasn't, but being treated that way by the artificial Kurisu was incredibly humiliating. Wouldn't it be a humiliation for all of humanity? Oh no.
これはなんとかすべきかもしれん。
You're so unlucky, Okabe. I said about to myself. Mayuri called out to me. She was carrying a lot of bags. It was probably materials for one of her costumes.
ねえねえ、今誰かと話してなかった？
お今のは大学のゼミの友達だ。
そっか。今日も遊びに行くの？
いや、今日は別に予定はない。マユリはこれからバイトか？
ラボでユキさんと待ち合わせ。
ラボ。
Was this good timing or bad timing?
そうだ。オカリンも久しぶりに一緒に行かない？ユキさんの手料理も食べられるよ。それとね、マユシーも頑張って作る予定なのです。どうかな？
In the end, I went with her.
ずいぶん嬉しそうだな。
嬉しいよ。
Mayuri had been smiling the whole time, but I was the opposite. The minute I got here, I was so nervous. I felt like I was about to throw up. I didn't really want to see Suzuha.
おお、岡部じゃねえか。
お、
Hey, hello. The door to the Brawn Tube workshop on the first floor opened, and out came the building's owner, Yuki Tenoshi.
店長さん、てってる
おう、
ー。うわー、T シャツ1枚で寒くないですか？
ふん。鍛えてるからな。
When I'd been living in the lab, I'd given him the nickname Mr. Braun. It had been a long time since I'd seen him.
岡部、その様子じゃちゃんと大学生やってるみたいじゃねえか。
どうも。そういえば家賃ってどうしてるんだっけ？
I asked Mayuri instead of him. I used to give it directly to Tenoshi, but
橋田がちゃんと振り込んでくれてるから安心しな。
そうですか。
おう。
this man, was he a rounder in this world line too? There was no way I could ask him. I couldn't help but be worried of him. That's why I started to put some distance between us. If nothing else, I avoided trying to interact with him.
じゃあね、あんま暴るんなよ。
Tenoshi saw that I'd gone silent and went back inside. Mayuri looked over at me with a worried expression.
大丈夫？やっぱり帰る？
行こう。
Tenoshi didn't matter. What mattered was, why would I hear? Ooh, did I feel like something needed to change? Or did I really want to show Kurisu the lab? I went up the stairs, still unsure of the answer. Mayuri went in first.
ごめんね、ユキさん。ちょっと遅れちゃった。まゆりちゃん、こんにちは。
Peeked inside the room. Oh, the music sounds so creepy. Daru and Yuki were there. Their eyes went wide when they saw me.
岡部さんも一緒だったんですね。
おかりん、久しぶりじゃん。
ああ、久しぶり。
I quickly scanned the room. There was no sign of Suzuha. Part of me was a little relieved.
入っても。
自分のラボで遠慮とかねえよ。
それもそうか。さすがにこの状況でクリスを呼び出すことはできなさそうだな。
I followed Mayuri to the lab and tried to relax my legs by sitting on the couch, but I didn't feel relaxed at all. It felt like my skin was crawling. I glanced over at Yuki.
ユキさん、そのお洋服かわいい。
まゆりちゃんにそう言ってほしくて着て
Just
きた
her
の。
head. She doesn't have the hat.
ルーシーも着てみたいのです。
後でお洋服取り替えっこしてみる？
サイズ合うかな。
I'd heard about Yuki's future from Suzuha too. I still couldn't believe someone as pretty was going to marry Daru. Oh, should I answer this? Is it gonna be her? Is it gonna be her? I don't know about this. Even Daru seemed to share that opinion. That's how much of a miracle it was. No, he doesn't want to talk to her right now. Yuki and Suzuha really did look similar. There was no doubt that she was Suzuha's mother. Still, Daru seemed to have... Oh no! Still, Daru seemed to be having trouble with her. He'd send lots of messages complaining about how he didn't know how to deal with it. Or things perhaps starting to go wrong. If the world lines converged, the two of them were going to marry no matter what. I ignored Kurisu's call. I was sure she'd complain later, but there were some things I just couldn't help. No, don't talk to them, and don't talk to her in front of them. And then I saw an old vacuum lying on the floor. What was this thing, I asked myself, and then I realized that it was future gadget number 5. What was it doing here? I put all the future gadgets in the back room. That's crazy. You could actually pick to talk to her or not. No one was planning on cleaning with this thing, were they? We MacGyvered it to the point that it didn't work as a vacuum anymore. I should put it away. He just said he didn't want to talk to her, so I'm not talking to her. I took gadget number 5 in the back room. It felt even messier than it had last summer. Most of the new stuff belonged to Daru. I could see a lot of anime, computer games, pre-order bonuses, art boxes, books, and figure boxes. But there were also a lot of parts and machines I didn't recognize. Was Daru really working on the time machine? That's crazy. That's probably gonna have consequences. Just once Daru and I had something like a fight over the time machine. I can still remember his exact words. It was rare for Daru to be so forceful about what he was thinking. Did I just hear something? There it was again. Was it a rat?
Oi, Daru! ネズミがネズミじゃなくてガラガラヘビか？
ヘビってなんだよ、ヘビって。おじさん、静かに。
I knew that voice. I could sense someone there. Someone was moving around under the desk. I lay down and fearfully took a peek. There was Suzuha.
Oh.
What was he doing here? And then Daru walked in. Uh-oh. I tried to push Daru out, but it was too late.
やだ、ネズミがいるんですか？
ネズミ？ヘビ？どこ？
Mayuri and Yuki were peeking out from behind Daru's back.
鈴葉さん？どうも。
次のニュースです。明和党の駒沢康和衆議院議員が企業から不正献金を受けていた問題で、駒沢議員は今日
That's crazy that they give you that choice to call them during conversation when he just said he doesn't want to call her. Someone left the TV on and was playing the afternoon news. Susan knew no one was watching it, but she used the remote to turn the volume up anyway. She wanted to keep the girls in the shower room from hearing us. I could hear Mayuri and Yuki laughing from the shower. Things had gotten really awkward when Yuki had found Suzuha, but Mayuri quickly came up with a plan. At first, her plan was for the 3 of them, including Suzuha, to shower together and hopefully get Yuki and Suzuha more comfortable around each other. But Suzuha said that the shower room was too small for 3 people and refused. Suzuha was staring up at the ceiling.
オカリンが悪いんだ。
誰が事前に教えてくれなかったからだろ。
教えるタイミングなんてなかったじゃん。オカリンがいきなり。
もういいよ、2人とも。私がうかつだっただけで誰も悪くない。
そもそも彼女から隠れる必要があるのか？すでにダルの妹で通っているんだから、コソコソする方が逆に怪しまれるだろう。
Suzuha tried to avoid Yuki to begin with. Just meeting her father was enough to potentially cause a time paradox, she said, and that chance went up even more if she met her mother. But Yuki had found her before long, and Suzuha had been forced to say she was Daru's little sister. Yuki believed it, so why make things any more complicated?
そうなんだけど、母さんが思った以上に私と仲良くなりたがるんだ。あまり会話しすぎるとボロが出かねない。
自分とよく似てる人間が現れたら嫌悪するか興味を示すかのどちらかだろうな。
And Yuki Amane was the latter.
嫌われた方がずっと楽だよ。
いっそ事実を打ち明けるわけにもいかないか。
Right now, only a few people knew that Suzuha was a time traveler. Me, Daru, Mayuri, and Ferris. That was
つう
all.
かこのまま何も説明しなくていいんじゃね？天音氏はなんつうか秘密とか無理に聞きたがるような人じゃないと思うんだよね。鈴葉ならよくわかってるんじゃないか。
確かに未来の母さんはそんな人じゃなかったけど。
じゃあ大丈夫だって。いずれ時が来たら僕からちゃんと説明しとくよ。
本当？
ああ。
わかった。父さんに任せる。
Suzuha nodded.
で今後は天音氏を露骨に避けるのやめるっつうことで。
うまくやれるかどうか自信ない。
大丈夫だって。
お前が言うなって話だけどな。さっきだって相変わらず苦手意識出しまくってたじゃないかお前。
僕のことは今はどうでもいいっしょ。
And then the conversation came to a halt, which meant we started thinking about the voices coming from the chakra.
つうわけで
Daru opened his mouth. Perhaps he couldn't take it anymore.
ニコ生見てもいいかな。ブラチューの生特番があるんだ。
不許可って言っても主張するんでしょ。じゃあどうぞ。
Suzuha sighed, and Daru sat in front of the PC and put his headphones on.
何？おじさん。
いや仲のいい親子だと思ってさ。
そうかな。
ああ未来でもダルはこんな感じだったんだろ。
もっと痩せててかっこよかったけどね。
想像もつかないな。
And the conversation died again. There were a ton of things I needed to talk to Suzuha about. But that was why I couldn't say a word. Maybe it was the same for her. Since there was nothing else to do, Suzuha and I turned back to the TV. The news was still on.
今日東京銀座でフランスのファッションブランドル・パラディのオープニングイベントが行われました。
As the newscaster spoke, I could see over 100 women lined up in front of the store.
平和だね。私が物心ついた頃にはすでにこんな光景は存在しなかった。
On the TV, a girl in a pretty outfit was talking to an interviewer.
羨ましいな。彼女たちは誰も殺さなくていいし、誰にも殺されないんだね。私が育った時代はさ、相手が男だろうと女だろうと容赦なく殺さなきゃいけなかったんだ。次の瞬間には自分の命が終わるかもしれない。そんな恐怖が寝ても覚めてもつきまとってた。恐怖を忘れるためには狂気に身を任せて自分が殺す側に回るしかなかったよ。
That was war. That was Suzuha's life. I'd been to many nightmarish world lines, but none of them were that
父さん
bad.
たちはタイムマシンのことで反政府組織とみなされてね。
Daru had made the time machine that brought Suzuha here. It was far more powerful than the one that existed in the Alpha world line.
私も軍から離脱して父さんたちに加わったから警察や治安部隊に追われることになった。それからはもっともっとひどい戦闘が何度もあったよ。正義のための戦いなんて綺麗な言葉は使いたくない。たくさん殺したし友達や仲間も大勢殺された。その中には私の母さんもいた。
Daru was still staring at the computer screen, but I could see him twitch. He must have been listening to Suzuha while he pretended to look at the screen.
軍の無人機から私を守ろうとして機銃掃射で死んだよ。
This was the first time I'd heard how Yuki Amane died. She was in the next room right now, having fun in the shower, and that was how she was going to die.
この目でズタズタにされていく母さんを見た。 この全身で母さんの生温かい血を浴びた。
Maybe the reason Suzuha didn't want to talk to her mother in 2010 was that she didn't want her asking about the future. There was no way Suzuha could tell her that.
ねえ、おかりおじさん、
At some point, Suzuha's eyes had started to overflow with tears.
この世界線の行き着く先は地獄しかないんだ。今すぐじゃなくていい。時間切れにはまだ少しだけ時間があると思う。だからもう一度だけその考えてお願い。お願いだよ。
俺は
I knew it. In my mind, I knew it. The right thing to do was to do as she asked. But
死にたくないよ。
the sensation I felt when the knife slipped into her flesh and I took the life of the girl I loved. It went from my hand to my arm and then to the rest of my body, and I started shaking. My vision blurred, then almost went black. My hands went to my mouth. There was a wave of pain, like my stomach was turning inside out.
おじさん、
大丈夫か、オカリン。
悪い。
Suzuha poured me a cup of water and I gulped it down.
ごめん。こんなことまだ話すんじゃなかった。
いや、大したことない。大丈夫だ。
I sank into the sofa and tried to calm down.
鈴葉の言いたいことも気持ちもよくわかるんだ。けど俺は何度も世界線を漂流してきた。こことは違う世界線でタイムマシンに運命を翻弄される人たちを見てきた。
I looked straight into Suzuha's eyes.
お前の非業の結末さえ見てきた。俺自身もそれに巻き込まれて何もかも無力だってことを知った。
Humanity was powerless before the laws of this
タ
world.
イムマシンを使って世界線を改変するのはこの宇宙の仕組みから逸脱することだ。俺たち人間が手を出していい領域じゃない。いわば神の領分なんだ。それに触れれば俺たちはもっともっと残酷な罰を受けることになる。俺はそう思う。
それがオカリンおじさんの答えなの。
少なくとも今はな。
そう。
ただの逃げだとなじってくれてもいい。
そんなことしないよ。
Suzuha looked at the ceiling inside. That must have been a habit she picked up lately.
続いてのニュースです。厚生労働省はアメリカで猛威を振るっている新型の脳炎ウイルスについて今のところ日本国内での発症例は報告されていないと発表しました。ただこの新型脳炎は潜伏期間が長いことからすでに国内に上陸している可能性も否定できないとして感染症法に基づき全国の医療機関に対して新型脳炎対策と感染症発生動向の速やかな調査を指示しました。ここからはお茶の水医科大学の春山倉庫教授にお話を伺います。春山さん、この新型の脳炎というのは具体的にはどのような症状が出るものなのでしょうか。
新型脳炎は感染力は弱いのですが潜伏期間が長く突然発症します。症状としては幻覚や記憶障害が主ですね。例えばそうですね、会社で仕事をしていたはずなのに気がつくと家にいたりですとか、会ったこともない人に会った記憶があるというような症例が報告されています。あとは実際には発生していない事件が起こった覚えがあるなどといった記憶の混乱も現れているようです。夢と現実の区別ができなくなったり、時間感覚を失ったり、周りの人と記憶が一致しなくなるので錯乱状態に陥ったり、いわゆる寝ぼけているような状態、デジャブのようなものと言えますが、 もっと症状がはっきりしています。
治療法についてはいかがでしょう。
他の農園と違いまして、適切な治療を受ければ比較的速やかに完治することが分かっています。ですので、もし国内で感染者が出たとしても、それほど恐れることはないと思いますよ。
The reporter was still talking, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. The information I just heard was that shocking. A new kind of encephalitis. I knew the symptoms she was describing. Losing the ability to discriminate between dreams and reality. Losing your sense of the passage of time. Your memories no longer match those of the people around you. That was exactly the same as reading Steiner. The interior of the time machine smelled like metal and was covered in instruments of different sizes. The girl inside was sobbing. It had been almost an hour since Suzuha had left to go look around. She'd assumed that Kagari would have stopped crying by then, but she'd had no luck. No such luck.
いつまで泣いてるつもりだ。しっかりしなきゃダメだ。まゆ姉さんの気持ちを考えろ。
Kagari Shina looked up at Suzuha, her face wet with tears.
だから泣くんじゃない。鬱陶しい。
Suzuha walked over to Kagari and knelt down so they'd be at eye level. She had no intention of spoiling her. Her goal was to save billions of lives, and this was her first mission.
いいか、これからはカガリもワルキューレの一員とみなす。私の部下として扱う。非戦闘員じゃないからな。ここは1975年だ。知ってる人間は誰もいない。父さんもマユ姉さんも出生してない。つまり誰も守ってくれないんだ。自分の身を守るのは自分だけだと思え。いいな。
Kagari was a brave girl, and she finally realized that now wasn't the time for tears. She tried to stop crying. It wasn't working well, but it was a lot better for her emotions than sobbing. She was a smart girl. Suzuha knew that.
あまり時間がない。この時代の人間にタイムマシンが見つかったら大騒ぎだ。
The machine had landed on the roof of the radio building, which wasn't a spot that people visited often. The chances of anyone finding it were slim. But in this era, they had no one to help them conceal it. That meant they couldn't stay long. She needed to finish her mission quickly and move to the next time period.
何か失敗したらまたタイムマシンで時間を戻ればいいんじゃないの？
燃料の問題があるんだ。ジャンプできる回数は無限じゃない。肝心の場面で動作しなかったら話にならない。
そうなんだ。
立てるか？
Suzuha stepped out of the machine and beckoned to Kagari. Kagari looked surprised. Her eyes were narrowed at the bright sunlight. The sky above Tokyo in this time period was too dirty to be called blue. Smoke and dust clouds filled with who knew what were rising from the rows of smokestacks. It all combined with black exhaust from the cars that scurried along the ground to create a smog so thick you could literally see it. The sky above the city was covered by a veil of death. But still, it was the first clear sky that Kagari had ever seen. She'd only ever known from books and videos that the sky could be this bright. The nuclear weapons used during the Third World War had changed the weather over Tokyo, and their sky was constantly covered in dull gray clouds. The sun's light was always weak when it shone through them, and it was never this bright.
私が子供の頃はまだこんな感じの空だった。少しだけど覚えてるよ。
Suzuha looked up at the sky too.
空気が美味しい。
In 2036, you needed a filter and a mask to go outside for any length of time. Compared to that, 1975 was a lot
わか
better.
るだろ、カガリ。父さんたちがどうして世界線の改変に全てをかけていたのか。世界線がどうとか、歴史がどうとか、そんな理屈は後でいい。今はただこの空の色を守りたいと思えば。
Kagari slipped her hand into her pocket and took out their faded green Upa keychain. She stared at it with a sad look on her face. She was probably thinking about Mayuri, her mother, and she was probably trying to understand what it meant that her mother had put her inside the time machine. Suzuha decided that Kagari was alright now and closed the hatch on the time machine from the outside. The lock flipped on automatically. The only person who could open it now was Suzuha, whose biometrics had been loaded into the system ahead of time. Even if someone did find the machine, it would be a while before they found out what it was.
Kagari, これを見ろ.
Suzuha handed her a printout of a photo.
これ何？
IBN5100 っていうレトロ PC だ。私たちの時代に存在していたものはどれも満足に動かない。けどこの時代なら感動品が入手できる。これを手分けして探すのが私とお前の最初のミッションだ。連絡はこれで。
She handed Kagari a small transceiver.
通信できる距離はかなり短いらしいから気休め程度だと思え。
オーキードーキー。
90分ごとにこのビルの前に集合。状況を確認。それを繰り返す。いいな。
オーキードーキ
ー。いい返事だ。
Suzuha nodded and patted Kagari on the head.
よし、ミッション開始。
Suzuha was on top of the radio building in 2010 looking down.
35年か。
That's how long ago it had been in real time since she'd spoken to Kagari here. From her perspective, it had only been a few months. The view from up here had changed a lot since then, and in the next 26 years, it would change even more. She'd seen for herself how this building changed over a span of 61 years. The thought didn't make her feel sentimental. Instead, she felt the loneliness and fear that comes from having a past not shared with anyone else. Using the time machine to change the world lines means breaking the rules of the universe. Rintarou Okabe's words flashed through her mind. Still, lately, she'd been thinking more about Kagari. She'd been searching the city at regular intervals. She was looking for Kagari Shina. She didn't even know if she was in Tokyo. She had no clues. She didn't even know what Kagari looked like now. So maybe it was a waste of time. Even so, she had to find Kagari herself. But she hadn't had any better luck today. She turned around and looked toward the time machine. She would come here every day. Her primary reason for coming was to see if her father, Itaru Ishida, had been here. Anytime she let her guard down, he would come to try and examine it. She told him it would cause a time paradox, but he didn't listen. She needed to keep constant watch. To be honest, she had a lot of things she had to do. And then she heard the metal door to the roof open. Was it her dad? She squinted into the darkness, but the person she saw was much smaller than Itaru and had cat ears coming out of her head. Okay.
なんだ、ルミ姉さんか。
Ferris Nyan had a spring in her step as she approached Suzuha.
ルミ姉さんって誰のことかにゃ？フェイリスはフェイリスにゃ。
ルミ姉さんはルミ姉さんだよ。
Ferris's real name was Rumio Akiha. She was Daru's friend and had helped him them in many ways, different ways in 2036. So Suzuha had known her ever since she was very young and had always called her Big Sis Rumi. For whatever reason, in this era, she always wanted to be called Ferris, though. When Suzuha asked why, she simply responded, Ferris is Ferris, yeah, an answer which meant nothing to Suzuha.
ラボに誰もいなかったからこっちかなと思ったら正解だったにゃ。はい、差し入れ。余り物で悪いんやけど。
Ferris showed her a cake box with the logo from the maid cafe where she worked, Maid Queen Young Squared.
父さんがラボに不在でよかったよ。
If he ate something like that at this hour, he'd get even fatter.
ダルニャンじゃなくてスズニャンへの差し入れにゃ。
私に？なんで？
にゃふふ。好きなくせに。
Ferris grinned and nudged Suzuha in the side with her elbow.
私は別に。
アップルタルトにモンブラン。あとイチゴのショートケーキもあるにゃ。ほら、美味しそうだにゃ。
Ferris opened up the box and showed her what it was inside. Suzuha could smell the sweet cream and fruit.
さあ、今すぐ美味しく食べるといいにゃ。心置きなく食べるといいにゃ。ほら、あんして。その可愛いお口に食べさせてあげるにゃ。
冷蔵庫にしまって明日食べる。
すずにゃんはストイックにゃ。
Ferris laughed and handed over the box.
賞味期限は明日だから明日中に食べなきゃダメにゃぞ。
ありがとう。
どういたしまして。
Ferris gave her a mischievous wink and looked up at the time machine beside them.
ダルニャンのタイムマシン研究の方はどうかにゃ。
頑張ってはいるみたい。ルミ姉さん、このマシンまだここに置いておいても？
Suzuha looked around the roof as she asked. It was solely thanks to Ferris that no one had really noticed the massive object on the roof. She was the heir to a rich family that had a lot of influence in this area and contributed a lot to the development of Akihabara. She was helping to hide the time machine.
このフロアというか屋上はフェイリスが借り上げちゃったから平気にゃ。オーナーさんには体感ゲームの研究をしてるって言ってあるにゃ。ちょっと苦しいわけにゃけど
助かるよ。
気にしないでいいにゃ。この世界のエレメンタルを売薬兵たちの魔の手から救うためならフェイリスはいつでも協力するにゃ。
そう。昔から、いや、今からしたら未来か。思ってたんだけどさ、ルミ姉さんの話って時々すごく難しくなるんだよね。一体何語？
考えるんじゃない、感じるのにゃ。
いいや。
寒いにゃ。フェイリスはお家に帰ろうかにゃ。
In the end, she never could get an answer. To Suzuha, Ferris was always a great mystery.
送っていくよ。一緒に出よう。
にゃ。それじゃあついでにうちでご飯も食べてくといいにゃ。
そういうつもりで言ったわけじゃないんだけど。
どうせ普段大したもの食べてないにゃ。スズニャンのストイックさを見てるとフェイリスがなんとかしてあげにゃきゃーって思っちゃうにゃ。保護欲？母性？とにかくそういうのがかきたてられるのにゃ。
私は大丈夫だから。
Before she finished her sentence, she felt someone looking at her. She glanced around.
にゃ。どうしたのにゃ。
She listened carefully. She definitely heard a very faint sound from the direction of the metal door that led to the stairs. It was small enough that Suzuha was only able to notice it because of her training.
誰かいる？
にゃにゃ。
多分話を聞かれた。
Most of the discussion was worthless, but they talked about the time machine a little. If someone heard that... Suzuha yanked her gun out of her jacket and in an instant ran towards the stairs as fast as she could. She'd heard someone running down the stairs as soon as she did. The sound, heavy military boots, and a wide stride got farther and farther away.
早い。
She opened up the door and jumped onto the landing. Then she raced down the stairs, skipping 3 steps with every stride. But still, it wasn't fast enough. Suzuha was born fast, and she'd been trained to be faster, but it wasn't enough. When she finally made it to the 2nd floor, she could hear the loud revving of a motorcycle. She panicked and slipped on an object that had been left halfway up the stairs, then rolled her way to the bottom. She managed to get into the right position and protect her head, so it was her hips that struck the ground. She forced herself to stand up and run outside. She could see the taillights of a large motorcycle speeding away. The driver was wearing a black helmet and riding suit, and already a good distance away, so she couldn't even tell if they were a man or woman. They revved their engine loudly as if to mock her, and then spun a corner and disappeared onto Center Street. A little later, Ferris caught up.
大丈夫かにゃ。
逃げられた。
それしまった方がいいにゃ。
She put the gun in her hands back in her jacket holster and brushed away hair that sweat had stuck to her brow.
今の誰にゃ。
わからない。けど 一般人じゃない。訓練されてると思う。
訓練？
階段に何か落ちてなかった？
バッグが転がってたにゃ。
ちょうど死角になる位置だった。多分わざと落としたんだよ。しかも私がそこを通るタイミングでエンジンを空ぶかしした。見事に引っかかったよ。
トラップってことかにゃ。
ああいうことがとっさにできるっていうのは特殊な訓練を受けてるからだ。じゃなきゃ無理。
Suzuha glared in the direction the bike disappeared and started to think. Who was it, CERN? There was an unofficial CERN group, the Rounders, that were searching for IBM 5100s in Akihabara. Rintarou Kabe had told her that, but he'd only encountered them in another world line.
誰かはわからないけど、私たちの他にタイムマシンのことを知ってる奴がいるのは間違いない。
Was it that they know about it, or but weren't going to do anything more? Or did they intend to steal the time machine from her? Since she didn't know, she had to assume the worst, or she wouldn't be prepared to deal with it. She looked up to the sky and sighed. It was becoming a bad habit.
ねえ、ルミ姉さん。このことはオカリンおじさんには内密にしておいて。
なんで？
今のオカリンおじさんが知ったらタイムマシンを破壊しろって言いかねない。危険だからって。でしょ？
そうにゃけど。
私は絶対にマシンを守るよ。シュタインズゲートの入り口へオカリンおじさんを連れて行かなきゃいけないんだから。それが未来の父さんとの、私をここに送り出してくれた人たちみんなとの約束だからさ。
すずにゃ。わかったにゃ。その代わりダルニャにだけはちゃんと話しておくこと。
オーキードーキー。
The last part was almost a whisper as her words melted into Akihabara's sky. Alright then. It's always ... for some reason. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Bye!